Good morning, great noon. We will start in 1 minute. Feel free to share on chat where you are joining us from the world. Okay, so it seems that we are on time. And again, welcome. Great morning, afternoon, noon from wherever you are joining us around the world. Welcome to our first webinar in the Gen AI for software developer, the second wave. My name is Adi. I'm the Digital and App Innovation Azure GTM coming from Southeast Europe. And together with me, Moria Dror, the EMEA Regional Reactor PM, and we are going to be your host for today. And with us, amazing lineup of speakers that probably your faces are quite familiar to you from Ignite, from Universe, from multiple conferences around the world. We have Laurent, Principal Cloud Advocate from Microsoft, and April, Senior Developer Advocate from GitHub. And to be honest, whenever I hear those two, I can never get enough. So before we're going to start, we would like to share with you just a few logistical notes. Today's session will last 1 hour and 15 minutes. During the entire event, you can type your questions in the Q&A chat. Our moderators and speakers will do their best to answer most of the questions that you have. And if you don't want your name to be visible in the public chat, so you can have the option to type your questions anonymously. Today's event will be recorded, and you will receive the recording along with the presentation deck and some additional resources. If you would like that, just to make sure that you registered through our official registration page. In case you didn't, feel free to scan this QR code or to go to the chat link of the registration page. And in the next 30 minutes, please register again to this event to make sure that you are all set up and you're going to get the assets and the resources. At the end of the session, our moderators will post a survey link in the Q&A chat. We kindly ask you to spend a moment to fill in this survey and to share with us your feedback regarding today's event. And also, please share what, if you have some additional sessions in mind or topics that you would like us to cover, do that. Let us know what interests you. Last but not least in the housekeeping, contest. In today's session, we will run an amazing contest during the session, and you can win an online voucher offered by GitHub. So how the contest is going to work, at the end of the session, we will post a question related to the topic presented during the webinar. And the first person who will answer correctly will be declared as the winner. For transparency, we will post the winner's name on the public chat. So if you don't want your name to be visible again to others, you can also enter anonymously. Our team will contact you through the private message to validate you and to give you the voucher and instruction how to use it. In case the initial winner cannot be contacted or doesn't meet the criteria, we will contact the next person on our records. We wish you good luck in this competition and may the best and fastest win. So this webinar marks the beginning of the Gen AI for Software Developers series, a sequence of sessions designed to elevate your AI development skills progressively. So make sure that you are part of each one of them, because on every session, they are building up upon the last ones, unlocking new level of expertise. You can register to the upcoming webinars on the main website. We will share that on the chat, but what you can expect. So you can expect to have sessions about how to take general application from prototype to production, how to manage AI infra, covering scale up, covering FinOps and additional topics. And lastly, we're going to speak also about the security in the age of AI, how to secure your generative AI apps. And If you like this session, and I'm sure you will, check out also our Microsoft Reactor. Microsoft Reactor is our community hubs for developers and startups to meet, learn, and connect. We have physical hubs in different locations worldwide, but we also offer programming online where you can join anytime from your home. You can scan this QR code, and we will also share on the chat the link to see amazing sessions about GitHub, about security, data, developing different programming language. So check it out. And this is my great pleasure to give the stage to April from GitHub.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I see a lot of you across EMEA joining us today. I'm joining you from the UK, and my esteemed colleague Laurent is joining from Switzerland. So we love having you here. So we do welcome questions. We're going to do our best to answer them in chat, but we will try to answer them during the session if at all possible. So let's go ahead and get started. Laurent, you ready?
I am all ready.
All right, so hopefully everyone knows who Laurent is. If you don't, you can check him out on LinkedIn. We've put our LinkedIn tags there. We also can be followed on Twitter. And again, we love questions. Reach out to us after the event as well. So we're bringing GitHub and Microsoft together in this session. So let's talk about why GitHub and how GitHub and Azure are better together. So GitHub, right? It's the developer platform. It's been around for a long time, and it's an end-to-end platform. This isn't the original platform that you knew back in 2008. That was literally just code and source control. So we have brought together some of the best industry development tools with AI backing it, and we've put security at every step of the way. Now, I mentioned GitHub, what isn't the original GitHub that you may know and love. When GitHub started in 2008, it was just source control. And for any of you out there that were around in 2008, writing code and pushing your code to GitHub, you remember it was literally a source code repository. So how does it all come together as GitHub as a platform to today? Well, we have various components. First off, let's talk about collaboration. As a developer, talking and communicating is hard. I live in the UK, and I always tell people I speak two languages. I speak British English and American English. And Laurent, my colleague, speaks French, German, English, and probably a few others because he's so well spoken. However, in that collaboration piece, we use different versions of English. Our life experiences play into that, how we interact, our life, how long have we been in the industry for, what we're all bringing to the table. So with that, we have brought in some tooling to help with the collaboration piece, whether that's things like your pull request, inner sourcing technologies and products. We have discussions, we have searchability, projects, and issues, all built into the GitHub platform. Then when it comes to productivity, we have things like GitHub Copilot, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and we're going to talk about some of that later. But we have things like CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous delivery with GitHub Actions, GitHub Code Spaces, and even the ability to use GitHub on your mobile device. But underpinning all of this is security. Security is the forefront at every single thing we deliver. We're going to touch a little bit on security today, but we're also going to talk about some of the other access controls that are at place. But most importantly, we need to talk about scalability, because the reality is, at Microsoft, where Laurent is working, there are many, many thousands of developers, and you might work for a large organization that is trying to embrace the cloud, whether it's Azure, GitHub, or maybe another cloud provider, or you could be a small startup that is learning to grow, and then you need to think about your scalability long term. So that pretty much covers off GitHub as a platform.
Yes, and sorry, I missed a cue here. So Azure, right? So just like April was talking about GitHub and how it grew and how it's so much better. I remember the days where I was, using basically a shared folder as source control, and then we would do zip files from time to time for backup, right? GitHub is, really making my life way easier now because you have all those, commits, and the history is always saved, and then you have those branches for security. And similarly, I think Azure is really where you can find a great platform to deploy your IDEs and to deploy your application and to try new things. I love to have an ID in the morning and immediately be able, without having to go and purchase a server and having to place a purchase order and then wait until the server is here and then notice that, okay, maybe I don't have enough RAM, so I have to order my RAM and then I have to upgrade, etc., just so that I can run my application. Here, I can just go to Azure, create for example, a new app service, a new function application, or a new static web app like we will do in my demo, and then basically publish it and try it out. And this is really a great place to do the workflow. GitHub is helping us there tremendously by offering a lot of automation. And again, automation, like my good old friend Abel Wong was saying, right? You don't want to have to worry about the deployment steps. So what you do is that beforehand, you prepare everything, you do your pipeline. We will create some GitHub Actions in the demo later. And then every time that you commit to main and you are like, okay, this is going to production now, this is going to be automatically deployed, you can always revert back very easily as well, which is super important because if you publish something and then suddenly you notice you missed a bug, you want to be able to fall back to the previous version. So all that is streamlined. And of course, automation, yes, but also security. You know that we are constantly under attack. You may have read that security is the #1 concern at Microsoft right now. And of course, this is true for Azure. This is true for GitHub. And by offering the latest and greatest improvements in terms of security, we make sure that everybody is protected. So we offer an end-to-end developer experience. First of all, in terms of IDEs, integrated development environment, you can use what you like. Personally, I'm a Visual Studio person. I like the, big and huge, very powerful, but also extremely fast to start. They made so many improvements in terms of performance that is really amazing. Everything is integrated. I just do file new project and then I can run my application. But some people prefer to go with Visual Studio Code. And in fact, I use Code as well. And we'll see in my demo how I use it. Code is great for because it's lightweight. It's easy to extend with additional extensions that you can get on the marketplace. Most of the extensions are for free, by the way. And then you can connect to Azure. You can do a lot of things. You can manage your source control directly from Visual Studio Code as well. And finally, there is also CodeSpace. And CodeSpace is really pretty amazing because it allows you, every time that you have a repo, you can just press dot, or if you're not sure, you just change the .com in .dev. And then that's going to open a full-blown development environment inside your web browser. CodeSpace also allows us, for example, to publish demos where we have everything instantiated for you. We go and create some virtual machines on Azure and everything. So essentially, the possibilities with CodeSpace are really endless. On the pipeline and automation side, we have, of course, GitHub Actions, etc. But we also have Azure DevOps, which is still supported. We have Bicep here, which is going to allow you to automate your deployment. This is really super powerful. We have the Azure CLI, the command line interface, which also allows you to write scripts and run those scripts automatically. All that going, of course, to the cloud platform Azure. Languages, developers, I think it's well known that Microsoft is a developer platform, right? I'm not going to do the dance, but basically we support pretty much everything. Python, of course, super popular these days. JavaScript, obviously, .NET, Java, Go, and many more, okay? And all this on top of GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot is going to help us to automate a lot of steps and to take advantage of generative AI to write code. I'm using Copilot, because sometimes I don't remember things, to understand code that I wrote 2 weeks ago, because I tend to forget, why did I write this code? I'm sure it happens to everyone, or maybe just to me. I'm a little bit worried right now. And of course, Copilot is also going to help me to learn new concepts. I've been doing C# and .NET for 20 plus years now, but C# is constantly evolving, and sometimes Copilot is proposing to me a new construct, a new way to write things, which I didn't know you could do. So this is super powerful.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the DevOps lifecycle, right? We want to learn to plan, to build our code, to build it, test it, and then have that continuous deployment, and then also that operational piece. And then we monitor and observe. So we think about the DevOps process, the DevOps lifecycle. We need to look at where this tooling fits in. So Laurent and I are going to take you on a little bit of a journey. We're going to talk about how we write code, how we build our code, how we deploy it, and then how we operate it. We're not going to cover off every part of the deployments, the DevOps cycle per se, but we're pretty much going to cover off from beginning, the initiation of an idea, how you then deliver that with GitHub into Azure. So first off, we're going to talk about code, and I'm going to allow my colleague Laurent to talk about the Visual Studio family because it's his love and passion.
Yeah, I mean, Visual Studio is, the most powerful developer environment you can have right now, I think. And definitely there are tons of development environments you can use. We have competition in the .NET .NET area, which is great. I mean, definitely we love competition. It helps us being better. But I think that the Microsoft Visual Studio is really the most powerful you can have right now. Visual Studio Code, like I mentioned, the big strength of Code is that it is multi-platform. You can run it on Mac, on Windows, on Linux as well. And all this is, of course, extensible. So you have tons of extensions that you can use and add. The integration with GitHub is seamless, meaning that both in Visual Studio and in Visual Studio Code, you can connect to your repositories, you can commit and push and pull directly from there. In Visual Studio Code, I will show you some extensions which allow you to manage your pull requests, to manage your GitHub Actions, for example. And also, of course, the built-in intelligence. You know that generative AI has exploded so much in the past couple of years. It's crazy to think how fast it went since we barely started talking about generative AI. And now GitHub Copilot is fully integrated both in Visual Studio and in Visual Studio Code. You can interact with it just by typing a comment and asking essentially GitHub Copilot to write the code or to propose some code for you. But you can also do things like, for example, explain to me what this code does, or how can I optimize this method? And of course, the context in generative AI is super important. By using GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio or in code, you give to Copilot for this particular session and in a very private manner access to your source code files, which provides a lot of context about, okay, how can I basically use this class, use this API, etc., etc.
So Laurent, I've always heard, but it worked on my machine when I'm coding in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. So I want you to touch on how we fixed that with GitHub Code Spaces.
Yeah, so CodeSpace is really cool. So the concept behind it is a dev container. And I think that if you hear the word container, you maybe are a little bit scared like me. I'm not really a container expert. But one thing that I love is that the container is an absolutely how should I say that? It's an absolutely enclosed environment where you have everything you need. And essentially, what it means is that this container is going to provide you the exact same environment than the person who created the container or my colleague who is using the same container. So GitHub with Code Spaces is offering you a way to run those containers directly in GitHub. And what you can do is basically go to a repo, say, all right, this repo actually has a dev container. I want to start a code space, and then using either directly the web browser, or you can also connect to the code space from Visual Studio Code, then you can start developing. Now, the huge advantage is that you're going to have everything installed. So let's imagine that you want to do some Python. For example, I don't have Python on my physical machine, but mostly it's because I don't need it, because if I need to go and collaborate to a code space where Python has been installed, well, basically it is there. And so I will be able to do everything I need. Same thing for tons of Azure services also, which you can then run in your dev container. For example, I just heard recently we have now PostgreSQL, for example, as a dev container. So this is really super convenient. And really the fact that you can reproduce the environment without having to worry about what you actually have on your physical machine. So this is a great peace of mind. So Copilot, we talked about it a few times already. I'm not going to repeat myself here, but just quickly, right? A great way to generate code, to propose code. Keep in mind, Copilot is not a compiler. What it means is that the code that is generated by Copilot might fail compilations, very possible. It is basically a generative AI. It's going to propose things based on probability. And then after that, up to you to go and accept it, validate it, test it, and run it. So your job is not threatened by Copilot, but the job is evolving. We are doing a little bit more of validation, learning new concepts, learning new things, but also I have to go less online to look for documentation because this is directly in my IDE through the generative AI agent here.
So we're going to go ahead and talk about how we build our code, and I'm going to go ahead and let Laurent talk about GitHub Copilot for Azure. Now, everyone gets a Copilot, so we're going to try and differentiate some of these names a little bit.
Yes, so naming is hard, right? We know that. I think we say that. I think the term is, the two hardest thing in programming is the multi-threading and naming stuff. Like, you know, you always have to find good names. So here we prove that naming is hard. So Copilot, you have Copilot everywhere. You have Microsoft 365 Copilot, for example, in Teams. That's the agent which is taking notes for you and then telling you, all right, somebody mentioned your name here, etc. We have GitHub Copilot, obviously. And then we have Copilot for Azure. And Copilot for Azure is really going to help you in the context of Azure. So again, this is mostly a generative AI, but this time in the context of Azure. And so what it does is, for example, giving you advices on, all right, how can I, you know, the best way to deploy an application, for example, to an Azure a static web app or to an Azure function, etc. Maybe you can also troubleshoot your applications and ask, why is this application running in production in Azure not working as it should? And then we have tons of tools that can help you, but GitHub Copilot is going to advise you on how you can do that. And GitHub Copilot is for Azure itself is very simply as a chat box in Azure. So if you go to the public portal, and if you are part of the preview, you will already see that appearing there, and then you can ask typing and asking your questions.
And while we're talking about building and deploying, part of the build process should involve security. Now, security starts the moment your developers clone your code. So when Laurent talked about your favorite IDE, a lot of customers talk to us about security and safety. And the first thing I bring up to them is, are you allowing your developers to clone your code, your company's code, to their machine? Now, think about when you have a leaver in your organization, or you have a lot of contractors come in, which we see a lot in tech, right? Especially in development. What happens to the code that's on their machines? They've taken that company code with them. So that's why we use things like GitHub code spaces and keep a lot of things in a secure environment where we can kind of control the security protocols around it. Now, on top of that, when we build our code, we want to look at ways to secure our code. There's some great informatics out there about the cost of pushing vulnerabilities into production. It's many times, I don't have the number off the top of my head, I think it's like 160 times more costly than doing it in development. So we have quite a few things of code scanning, quite a few tools, one of them which is code scanning. This will scan your code every time a pull request is sent in. It's integrated into the developer workflow, and you can customize the workflow that runs every time you push your code. This is really critical in making sure that every single pull request gets a code scanning review. You could also set it to run on a timer. Maybe you want to run it twice a day or 4 times a day, depends how often you're pushing to production. Another great tool we have is secret scanning. We've all done this. We've all pushed a secret into our code. Why? Because we're rushed, or we've put it into a plain text file. And so many customers out in the world have been called out. Uber is one of them. Someone has more than once with Uber left a secret in plain text. So we offer up secret scanning so those vulnerabilities can be found before they're pushed to production as well. We also have a secure supply chain security mindset, and we use things like Dependabot. So if any of you are consuming open source software, which over 60% of organizations are, you need to know how to manage all that open source software you're consuming, and that's really hard to do. So Dependabot scans your dependencies in your repositories, opens up a pull request, gives you a suggested fix, and also lists the security vulnerability that is in there for you. We're not going to dive too much into GitHub Advanced Security, but if anyone out there watching wants more information, we can send it across. It is part of the GitHub Advanced Security package. So we're going to go ahead and talk about deployment. I'm going to let Laurent cover off this because he's going to be showing us actions in action in a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And so actions are really, for me, it's really peace of mind. So I'm not an infrastructure person. I'm really a developer, but I have to say I really embrace the actions with all my heart, mostly because it allows me to sleep at night, really. So actions are going to allow you to deploy your code faster. They are going to allow you to deploy to also staging environment much faster, to test and everything. And then after that, when you're done, you can merge your pull request. It's going to be integrated into the main much faster. But I think probably the best way to show that is to show the demo. So I'm going to jump in the demo straight ahead. And okay, a few numbers, you know, lots more deployment that you can do, as you can see. And of course, when you work with Azure, because this presentation is titled GitHub and Azure Better Together, right? You have tons of Azure specific actions and Azure specific workflows, which you can use, but by no means is it limited to Azure. You can use that pretty much everywhere. So jumping into the demo, I think I can do that because I'm going to show all that in the demo anyway. So I'm going to share my screen, and if I can select the right screen, voila. All right, so here I am into a GitHub repository. It's a very simple repo. And if I go to the Actions tab, you see that I already have one action, which is going, in this case, by the way, it's an Azure function action. So it's going to deploy an Azure function to Azure. And then you see that I already have a few runs here. Some of them have failed, right? They are red. Now, the cool thing is that everything is saved. So the reproducibility and also the fact that you can always go back and trace what went wrong is super useful. If I go and explore what went wrong here, I see that in the restore phase, for this .NET project, there was an error. It says project file does not exist. This hints that this is actually pointing to the wrong path. Later, I just fixed that. And then you can see that I have a few green runs. So if I wanted to start from scratch, I could go here and say new workflow. And that's going to give me already some proposals based on the repo here, which has a lot of .NET, is going to propose some .NET actions. But I also have some actions for deployment. You see that you have deploy to Azure, for example, continuous integration, automation, etc., etc. You can also, of course, decide to set the workflow yourself. And by the way, I want to underline here that you have the marketplace. And in the marketplace, you have hundreds of actions that you can find, which are developed by the community. So if you have a great idea for an action and you have something which works great, you can basically abstract it enough that it's useful for everybody and then put it in the marketplace. In this case, I want to start from scratch. So a great other place to start is the quick start. And here we have quick start for GitHub Actions. And if you scroll down, you have an example. So I'm going to copy this. Notice that this is YAML. YAML means yet another markup language. It's a markup language which people hate to love or love to hate. I'm not sure exactly which one, but it is very useful in this context and in the context of deployment in general, every time you want to have some structured actions. So we see that we have the name and then we have the run name, and you see that you have some parameters with those curly brackets, github.actor. This is going to take my name because I'm logged into GitHub at this moment. So it's going to show my GitHub username and show that as a parameter. Then we have the on keyword, which is a trigger. So it's going to be on push and really on any push because you don't have a branch. So it's going to apply to any branch to the repo here. And then you have your jobs, and the first job named Explore GitHub Actions. In fact, that's the only job in this simple action. It's going to run on Ubuntu with different steps. And the first step is going to echo. Basically, echo is console.writeline if you want. And it's going to say, okay, the job was automatically triggered by A and then the event name. And so you see that you can always use those parameters. You have different things that you can use. You have environment variables. You have you can even access secrets using this parameter syntax, and I'll show you that in a second. You can use bash syntax, for example, ls GitHub Workspace on line 17 there, and run this. So if I want to run this, I need to push. This is what's going to trigger that. And to do that, I'm going to commit this to my main branch directly. And since I am already in GitHub, it's going to do a push automatically for me. So if I go to Actions here, you see that the action is running now. If I click here to dive into it, I can open that and you see that it is going on. You see that the first few are successful. It found indeed the push event. It found that this is a Linux server on GitHub. It found the name of the repo, etc. It was even able to do an ls. You see that in my repo, I have the README and I have a src, which is actually a folder, but for Linux, folders are like files except with special attributes, and everything ran fine. So this is super simple, but it allows you to get familiar with that. Now let's look at a more complex action. So here I have another action which is way more complex. It is actually an action that I use to deploy to a static web app, and we'll see later how we can create that. So here you have the on, and notice that you have the push, but you also have on line 11 the pull request. So this is two triggers which are going to act to start this action. I also specified on which branch it's going to run. In this case, the main branch on line 6. And then after that, I have the path. And if you have multiple folders, multiple projects in your repo, it can be good to say on which path it's going to act. So every time that something is modified in one of those folders, the action is going to trigger. This avoids that you trigger the action on stuff that doesn't need to be deployed. Here later on line 20, you have workflow dispatch. I'm going to show you in a second what it means. But notice also on line 24, you have if github.even name equals push. So this is a condition for the job to run. So if it's a push or if it's a pull request, but only when it's closed, this job is going to run. So you see that you can have some relatively complex syntax in your action. I did mention the workflow dispatch, so let me show you how this works. So if I go to the actions here and click on the action which I just showed you, or I showed you the code, you see that I can here run the workflow, and I can run the workflow here from a specific branch. I could run this particular workflow manually from any branch, so it's quite convenient to do that. So let's start from scratch, and I want to use Visual Studio Code to do that and show you how you can use that as an integrated, pane of glass to manage everything. So I'm going to go and open a folder. In fact, this folder doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to create it. Let's put it simply here on my desktop. I'm going to call that demo. And now I am in the context of the folder, and it's empty, so I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to take a text file. Actually, sorry, I'm going to do this from here. It's a little bit easier. So I'm just going to type here index.html. This is an empty file. It's kind of tiring to always have to type HTML and then closing the tag and then the head and the body. So I'm simply going to ask Copilot here to do that for me. So create a basic HTML file. All right. It is going to propose some HTML. I review that. It looks good to me, so I can accept. All right. And by the way, I can run this here directly from Visual Studio Code using live server. So this allows me to test my application. You see that everything's working fine in localhost. Good. So now I would like to deploy this. But before I deploy, I probably want to commit that. So the cool thing is that you can do all this from Visual Studio Code directly. I'm going to go to the source control, initialize the repo. And then I'm going to type the most famous commit message of all time, first commit. I'm going to commit that, and I commit that to the main branch. You see here at the bottom, it says main. So this branch is new in this repo, so I'm going to publish it. But because it is the first time that I'm publishing, and because I am logged into GitHub here, I'm logged into Microsoft, but also into GitHub, it's going to propose to me to publish to GitHub, and I'm going to publish that to a private repository. So I'm going to say, yes, let's do that. Few things are happening down there, and now it is published. If I open on GitHub, you see that my code is up there. I just have this HTML file. Good. So now how do I send this to Azure? Well, what I want to use here is an Azure static web app because it's probably my favorite service on Azure right now. So let's go and create this. So I'm going to type static web app is the first choice. And by the way, you could totally do that from Visual Studio Code as well using the terminal and AZ CLI, the command line interface. But personally, I'm more of a visual person. I like to do this in the portal. All right, going to create a new resource group. This is just a grouping of all the resources I'm going to use here. I'm going to type the name here. It is validated. You have multiple tiers that you can use. The free tier is great for your hobby, personal projects, your family website, your association, as long as it's not monetized. But even the standard tier is actually pretty cheap. It's around $9 per month. So if you compare this with a classic web server where you have really a server, static web apps are a lot cheaper to run. And then, as you can see, we are promoting here the usage of GitHub, Azure DevOps, or other source control, but basically we are promoting CI/CD as a first-class citizen here. So it is connected to my GitHub account. I'm going to select here the organization, which is essentially right now it's my private repo. And then I'm going to select which repo I want to deploy from and the branch, which is the main branch. Here it says, okay, it proposes some custom presets, but actually you have quite a lot of presets which are available: Angular, Blazor, Next.js, React, Svelte, Vue, etc., etc. Also static site generator, Gatsby, Hugo, and more. So I'm going to select HTML, and here I don't need to change anything because my index.html is already at the root of my folder. And if I preview the workflow file, you see this is again a static web app GitHub action, which is going to be directly put into my repo with the corresponding secret. So let's see if this works. Okay, so validation works. So I'm going to create that. It's just going to take a few seconds. So if you remember when I showed you the repo, I told you it was completely empty. Now the Azure portal, or basically Azure, is going to impersonate me because I am logged in. And then it's going to go into my repo and it's going to save the action as well as a necessary secret into the repo. So if I go to the resource, this is the static web app that was created. I can open it. Notice that, okay, it works, but there is nothing into it. But then if I go back to my repository, then you will see that if you go, and that's the wrong repo, if I go back, let's go back to simply to Visual Studio Code here, because from Visual Studio Code, actually, I can monitor everything. So if I go to my GitHub Actions, you see that this action is running right now. I can go and expand, and then I can see what's going on. It's going to take a few seconds to actually deploy this code. If I go to the secrets, under repository secret, you see that it did actually create a secret for me. By the way, this secret, if you need to deploy the same action to a different static web app, what you would do is very simple. You would go back here to the static web app, and then you can go to manage deployment token. This is the value that you need to copy. And then you can go back here into code and change that. Like this, you can either refresh your token if necessary, or you can just deploy to another static web app. Okay, now at this point, the static web app is published. So let's go and test that. This was the empty one. If I refresh now, you see that it is working. Now let me show you very quickly, and that's the end of the demo, how I can make a change. And if you remember the static web app GitHub action that we saw before, there was also something to do with pull requests, right? So I'm going to add a file here, and I'm going to call this styles.css. And I actually prepared the snippet, so I'm just going to go and copy that off screen. Here we go. I could ask actually a Copilot to do that for me, but now I have my CSS, and then I'm just going to integrate that into my HTML. I could again do that with Copilot, but it's pretty simple. So now this is working. So this is my change. Now you probably don't want to deploy that directly to production. That would be a bad idea. Maybe I want to do an A/B test with my new design, or maybe I just want to ask somebody to test that. So what I can do is go and create a new branch. So I'm going to call that styling. And when the new branch is created, now I can go and commit my changes to the new branch. All right, so let's commit. Again, it detects that this branch has never been published before, so I'm going to publish it. And then it's automatically going to propose to me to create a pull request. And when I create the pull request directly here in Visual Studio Code, it's not only going to create the pull request in GitHub, but it's also going to trigger the action again to deploy. And the beauty here of static web app is that it's going to deploy to a staging environment where you can try things out without any risks. You can totally manage here the whole pull request from Visual Studio Code or from the website if you prefer. I could add a reviewer. I probably want to add April here to review my change. And when the action is finished to run, you see that it's running right now. If I go back to my environment, and if I go under environments down there, you see that it created a staging environment called styling. And right now it is still uploading. As soon as it is done, which should take really not more than just a few seconds, I'm going to be able to run this in a separate window. All right, now I can open this. And you see this is my new page. It's a different URL, so I can do an A/B test if I want. And this is the old page, which is still there. When I'm happy with the change and it's been reviewed, I can go back here. I can merge the pull request. And what it's going to do is that it's going to actually deploy to production, and it's going to delete the staging. So that was my demo. I hope that you see how easy it is to deploy to Azure using GitHub Actions. You can do all this directly from Visual Studio Code using a single pane of glass. Back to you, April.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see if I can remember how to share a screen today.
I think there's a button called share screen somewhere.
You know, you think I'd know this by now. All right. So for everyone watching, Laurent and I love demos. And so we kind of skipped over some of the content, but you can find actions for Azure into any cloud platform, literally any code, any platform. I want to talk about a little bit of security and private networking. It's a new feature we released at GitHub. You can connect a GitHub hosted runner to a private Azure VNet. I've put the walkthrough link below. There's a YouTube video. There's not a blog about it, but we have a ton of documentation. You can also connect from GitHub hosted runners into your own data center, because most of you are probably still running on-prem, or into any other cloud provider, any kind of SaaS platform as well. So take a look at that. That's one that's been asked by tons of people around the globe. We've finally gotten that out, and that's been pretty cool. There's a lot of other things we can do with it. It's securing your supply chain from end to end, but also gives you outbound network control and a whole suite of monitoring that you can pull in, and auditing, which is really critical for everyone out there. If any of you out there are using Azure DevOps or GitLab, we offer, and Bitbucket and Azure DevOps are the two big ones. We do see migrations from GitLab quite a bit. We have the GitHub Enterprise Importer that will help import a lot of your environments over if you're looking to migrate from another platform. I will say this though, it will depend, as we always say in tech, it depends to the configuration of your previous environment, what versioning you're on, but the Enterprise Importer has improved vastly. Also, GitHub Actions Importer. This is actually a really cool tool. If you're using GitLab, Jenkins, Azure DevOps, the Actions Importer helps convert everything over. And I will say secrets and custom plugins are not supported. So you do have to redo your secrets into either GitHub secrets, or if you're using something like Azure Key Vault and you're calling that in your Azure DevOps pipeline, your Azure pipeline, it's a pretty easy conversion if you're using a third-party tool. If you're inherently calling your secrets in your pipelines, just be really conscious of that. That doesn't always translate very well, but that's okay. You probably don't want your secrets migrating across anyways. So we're going to move to how we operate, and I'm going to run into a demo now, because we all like a good demo, don't we, Laurent?
We do.
We do. So I've actually forked Laurent's repository. For everyone out there, this is actually private. We've done it privately for the event. We will make it public after the event. Laurent's code is here. It's Azure and GitHub better together. We can pull up the link here. I will put that in the chat for everyone.
I can do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. My multitasking is less good than it used to be. So I want to go ahead and we've seen a lot of this from the IDE space going into Azure. I want to go into how we do this in GitHub. There's a couple different ways. Now, Laurent talked about GitHub code spaces quite a bit. Now, think about when you're getting started in a code repository. We go to the code button here, we clone our code, and that can take some time. And also, I need the tools to work on Laurent's code. I don't have a clue what tooling I need, because maybe he didn't fill out his README. So I don't know what tools I need. That's
so terrible. I know. I don't think there is even a README in there.
Everyone does it. Oh, good, I've broken code spaces. But normally I go to this tab, click code spaces, and open up a GitHub code space. I've obviously reached my limit for the week because I've done something naughty on my side. I'll figure that out later. But then I also have the ability to talk to Copilot here from the code base. So I could go to Copilot here and I say, explain this code to me. And I can start it as a task, and I can start going, right, GitHub Copilot will then open up GitHub Copilot Workspace, and it's going to analyze my task. And I just said to it, please analyze my code. So this is another way to get started. I'm working from the browser. Now, why do I want to work from the browser? I'm sitting on a Windows device. I have no idea what type of device Laurent's working on, but I've also got some Macs over here in the corner. So I can switch between my devices and still have a secure place in which to run my code. So it's going to take my task of explaining the code straight from the browser and analyze that task. It's being super slow this morning, which is not what we want it to do. Let's see.
By the way, April, I did open the repo in the code space on my screen. So if you want to, we can switch to my screen and you can take control, which is like super daring.
Let's do this another way.
Okay.
So we have I've put a couple different tasks in. So I want to talk about where we start in the DevOps process. We look to start a task, and it usually begins with an issue. We've been assigned something. So Laurent has actually given me a few different things we could do. We could modify our action for our code base, the GitHub action workflow. We could modify it, change the trigger. We could do some things with it. We could make our web app prettier. Very vague thing, but let's update the language in our code base. I think this is a great use of GitHub Copilot. So Laurent is using C# code in our code base, and he's also, I don't know, Laurent, have you put any tests into your code base?
I probably should.
Yes. Well, let's add some tests. What do we want to use? XUnit?
Yeah, why not? Any test is better than no test, so for sure.
Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I can create sub-issues. I can create tasks. So this is my issue. So how do I get started? I want to convert the C# to TypeScript. I'm not a super awesome TypeScript developer, but if I open this into a GitHub Copilot workspace, I've given it those tasks from the issue, and it's going to give us our specification. So we're going to test the internet again. I will admittedly say I've had some ISP issues in the last week or so this will be entertaining. So we'll let it run. In the meantime, Laurent, do you know any good jokes?
Oh my God, the only jokes I know, I cannot tell them on the public stream. I'm so sorry about that. You know me, right?
I got one for you. Why do developers always code in dark mode?
I heard that one, but I'm not sure.
Because the light attracts the bugs.
That is so cool. I know. And
Terrible
why do I
joke.
have to wear glasses? Because after 20 years of .NET, I cannot see sharp anymore.
Okay, that was pretty
Yes.
good.
Yeah, well, that's pretty lame.
Oh, fantastic. Well, because I'm impatient, I'm probably having some internet issues today because I'm streaming, and there's a long story why that's working. But I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about GitHub models. So I'm going to switch the narrative a little bit. We're going to come back to that workspace. It will go green up here with the little Copilot face when it's done running, and we'll switch back. I want to talk about GitHub custom models. So when we talk about AI, it's not just about GitHub Copilot giving us code suggestions in the IDE. We're doing a lot more with AI in the back end. So a lot of times as a developer, we might have a front end and a back end. We're trying to connect to AI models, but we have no control over the AI models that we're trying to use. So we've just released GitHub models recently. And for those of you watching, in literally 6 to 7 hours, there's a blog that I may have written on the .NET blog at Microsoft about the GitHub models and C# capability. So what we do is we go into the GitHub models marketplace that is available. I'm going to go ahead and pick a model. This is where we are given a playground. So I'm going to pick this one. Why not? So when I go ahead and click Get Started, it gives us a walkthrough. We need to create a personal access token, install some dependencies, gives us a basic code sample, and we can change the rate limits. Now, again, we can do this with the GitHub code space. We've made this ability to create code right within the browser, much more easier than having to download the code and all that good stuff. The other thing we've done is we've added some languages. So it does support Python, JavaScript, C#, and REST. So we're going to go ahead and put this in C#, and we can choose the SDK. So the Azure AI Inference SDK just come out. We also have the OpenAI one available. There was a question in the chat earlier about the difference of GitHub Copilot versus GitLab Duo. GitHub Copilot is not just in the IDE. We do a lot of customization around Copilot that we've introduced, and a lot of AI work around the OpenAI space and the Azure AI space. So this gives us the getting started. It gives us all the directions of where we want to go, and we can run this basic code sample. The other really cool thing that we do in this is we give you a playground. So the biggest part of developer in learning code is doing a thing. So we have a couple things we can do. We can go into the code here, and this will connect to the Azure AI inference. I'm going to go ahead and hit C# again, but we also have this chat capability. The other cool thing is we can define the parameters. We can put in the system prompt over here. We can also talk about the tokens. Now, the way AI works, to give you the short of the long, is when you give it a command, it tokenizes that command. Each word may be worth 1 token or several tokens. So this limits the tokens for the response. So I'm going to go middle of the road. We can increase that token size to give us a longer response, or decrease the tokens to give us that shorter response. The other thing is the temperature. How deterministic, how random do you want your response? I'm going to go just keep it at 0, but it can go all the way up to 1. There's some great knowledge of how this works, but it gives you a really good opportunity here to look at this. And then text diversity. I'm just going to use the top p-value, which is the most probable words. If any of you study machine learning and AI, there's some really cool stuff you can do, and this was not available before. So be able to set those parameters, change it, etc. So in our prompt here, we could prompt our code with this model with whatever we want. You know, so I don't know, Laurent, what do you want to ask it? We're going with C#. What do we want to ask it?
Oh, let's ask, for example, what is, I mean, we can literally ask anything, right? So
how about the best testing framework?
Yeah, why not? Why
or
not?
C#?
Yeah, so that was my point, right? What I was trying to find out is it's not just programming questions. It can be also tooling questions and everything. And by the way, the 5.3 medium models that you're using here is one of my favorites because it is what we call a small language model, which is really awesome because it can run locally on your machine. So the times of having to connect to a to a faraway model to ask it to do things and having connectivity issues or latency and everything soon will be over because those models, those small language models, can be installed directly, for example, on the new Copilot Plus PCs that we just released. So this is really awesome, and the fact that you can here choose the models that you want to use is extremely useful because some models are just better than others at some tasks. So this is really good that we can do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, it's not just programming questions, it could be around the code. We can go into our code and look at there. Let's change everything now. But yeah, we can go into chat and ask it quite a few things. So yeah, and Laurent, you're right with the different models. But having the playground is really cool. So you can actually sit and work in this playground once you have access to GitHub models, and then you can actually import this into your IDE and then push it to production. We have some great documentation on this. So we give you a free playground, play with the different models, get the output you want, and then look at getting started. And then that you can either put that into a GitHub code space, you saw that in the get started, or bring that into your IDE and then push that to production. So having the playground for me is one of the biggest things. Being able to play with new things, get an opportunity to see it is absolutely useful for what I'm doing. So it looks like we've kind of I've broken everything today. We're doing well. I'm going to refresh this and see if it comes back up.
Yeah, it's not very happy right now.
So there are some questions here I can answer while this is running.
Right.
It's probably a me issue because I always break everything I touch. Question someone asked about pricing for GitHub code spaces. The other thing about GitHub code spaces is you get free hours per month. It's 60 hours, but it's also a limited amount. I think it's like 15 gigs of storage. So once you max out on, the 60 hours, you then have to pay. So you can either set boundaries in a repository to prevent people from overbilling, or you can allow people to overbill in those repos. So that is available for you to look at, but you do get 60 free hours. So if you think of it as, you can also set code spaces to turn off. So mine are set to turn off after about 5 minutes, so that if I get up, go get a cup of coffee, get distracted, walk the dog, whatever, I'm not billing myself. So yeah, so good news, I've broken everything. I'd like to say I have a video of this working offhand.
So maybe just while this is going on, I can just switch to my screen. I just want to show the code spacing because this is something that we mentioned and it was not quite working. So essentially the idea here is that when you have your repo here, you can go to code, and then right now I did start a code space already. I'm going to show it to you in a second. you see that it is active. But if I didn't have any code space, I would have a button saying, okay, create a code space. And the cool thing, I'm just going to tap my camera so that it's sharp again. Here we go. This code space is actually here. And as you can see, it is very similar to what we had before with Visual Studio Code, because in fact, it is Visual Studio Code running in your web browser pretty much. So I can go and edit stuff directly here. So here, this is the README. This is Markdown. So I can start by maybe going and putting my README, putting a title here. If I press, basically, if I save, everything is immediately committed, and this is going to be available directly in the preview, as you can see here. So this is pretty cool. This is also valid, by the way, for your source code. So I can go and edit my C# directly in my web browser here. And in fact, believe it or not, but I've been doing that. So I have a pretty big phone here. People ask me how I like it. The answer is really, I really like it because it allows me to even do some code on my phone, which I know you shouldn't do. But when you're in a bind and you're in the middle of nowhere and you just have your 4G or 3G or whatever, and you want to connect and fix a bug, for example, that can be really useful. Now, the beauty of that is that in addition to everything that I showed you, which is by default, you can configure your dev container to have additional things. For example, to have some deployment scripts, to have Python installed, for example, to have these kind of things, and basically run everything here directly from your web browser in CodeSpace. So this is pretty beautiful here. That's what I wanted to show. Back to you, April.
Well,
and meanwhile,
I have nothing, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the deck, and then I think we can potentially just look at the contest. So I apologize to everyone. There's probably an outage somewhere in the world that we could look at. None of my workspaces are spinning up, which is not always a good show of things, but the program's still in beta. I just want to quickly review before we do the prizes and the contest. I just want to cover off, we've talked about a lot with GitHub and Azure, and I'm really sorry that we couldn't show the end-to-end with GitHub Copilot Workspace. I was trying to show the whole DevOps process where we plan our work, write our work, modify it, and then deploy it and mess with Laurent's code a little bit. But as we talk about GitHub and Azure, we talk about the different IDEs, the different deployments, the different tooling available, and the automation security that's there. There are quite a few questions in chat. We will try to answer them, and then I'll hand it over to Addie now, and we will do the contest.
Perfect. So let me share, and we have Moria with us. Go ahead, Moria.
Do you want to answer the 2 questions before we continue, or?
I guess you're going to do that online, and
can do it
we'll probably
online.
get some more questions. So by the end, we will open it up for additional questions.
Okay, perfect. So hi, everyone. As Adi introduced me at the beginning, my name is Moria Dror. I'm the regional reactor lead for EMEA. So without further ado, let's go to the questions and the prizes, because I know you probably are waiting for it. So I'm going to ask the questions. We're going to put it in the chat as well. Yeah, so let's go ahead. The question is, GitHub is an enterprise platform that includes many products. Which of the following are part of GitHub offering? We have 4 options. Number 1, GitHub Advanced Security, GitHub Copilot, Actions, GitHub Test Plans, Issues, and Projects. 2, GitHub Advanced Security, GitHub Copilot, Actions, Code Spaces, Issues, and Projects. 3, GitHub Copilot only. And 4, GitHub Copilot, Actions, Issues, Boards, Code Spaces, and GitHub Advanced Security. So please take your time, answer the questions in the chat. I see some people already submitted their answers. We will quickly go through a few other programs and offerings we wanted to share with you, and we will announce the winners just shortly. So take your time and post your answers in the chat. So as I mentioned, the Reactor program, it's a global program that Microsoft has. We have 10 locations worldwide, physical locations, but we also offer programming online aside from the in-person events. We can actually go to the next slide. I wanted to share with you some of the upcoming events. It looks a bit overwhelming, but if you go to our website, we shared the link before, you'll be able to see all the upcoming events that we have. Upcoming in this month. We have the Rug Hug series. We have a series on Microsoft Fabric and AI. Learning hackathon. We have another series on Copilot. We have another series on Fast Track for Azure. So there are really a lot of other many opportunities for you to attend. Everything, of course, is online. A lot of the series and the events that we are delivering through the Reactor, and actually even today, you can go to Microsoft Learn platform, a free platform that Microsoft offer, and learn more on different skills, on different areas that you want to learn more about by yourself on your own pace. Free and alone, so you don't have to always have the us during the sessions. After the session, you can actually go to Microsoft Learn and check the technical area that's mostly relevant for you. Submit a learning path, a model. So you can scan the QR code now and go to Microsoft Learn. Whether you're a developer or you're part of an organization, we offer free training and certificates. So I really recommend you to check it out. We actually have 2 dedicated parts of Microsoft Learn. We have the AI Learning Hub, which gathers all the opportunities for you to learn on AI, all the learning path that we have just specifically on AI, so very relevant for today's session. Another learning hub that we have is the that's the AI Learning Hub. Another one we have is the Copilot Learning Hub. It's divided to 4 sections. It's pretty straightforward. You can choose the area that you really want to focus, and you will have all the different opportunities, different learning paths that you can take by yourself, step by step, and complete them online. The advantage of Microsoft Learn is really that we have these sessions, and of course, it's really helpful when you join this, but it's an hour or more, you can still go online and submit the entire learning path and keep learning actually whenever you want. If you scan this QR code, you can visit the Reactor website. We have our website. We have the on-demand events that we post on the YouTube channel. You can also go to our YouTube channel, Microsoft Reactor, and see all the events there. I think we'll go back to another program that we wanted to share today, and then we will announce the winners. So for those of you who are interested in the Founders Hub program, I want to talk with you shortly about that. Microsoft Founders Hub is actually a program for entrepreneurs that offers you first of all, free credits, but it offers you a lot more than free credits and a lot of opportunities for the startups to join the program. And yeah, you can scan this QR code and check it out online. And you see all the benefits the Founders Hub offers for entrepreneurs. So if this is something that's relevant for you, I recommend you to go online to Founders Hub and learn of the opportunities that you can see. I see the answers are keep coming in the chat, and it's like a lot. I don't think we have any other questions. So I think it's time to
before the questions. Yes, let's announce the winner.
Yes, let's announce the winner.
Name...
Adi, you wanna be the one? So we'll see that David is the winner. Okay, so congratulations, David. We will be in touch with you, contact you to, we will get in touch with you in email to deliver the prize. So congratulations to David, and thank you all for everyone who joined and participated in the contest. Yes, I can see a lot of people asked what is the right answer.
Let's go back to the question.
Yes.
The correct answer is number 2, GitHub Advanced Security, GitHub Copilot, Actions, Code Spaces, Issues, and Projects. So congratulations, David, and for the rest of you who answered correctly. And what we're going to do right now, we're going to, let's look at your questions, because we have a few of them that were not answered. So it's an opportunity for you to leverage the 12 minutes that left to answer as much as you can with while we have the expert with us. So one of the questions that I see are not answered is, these courses can be recorded so we can watch it later too. I'm not sure, Robert, whether you were speaking about the Microsoft this series. This one is recorded. We also have a lot of courses on the Reactor YouTube channel. A lot of great content to look at. Our series again is going to be recorded, so make sure that for the next sessions you will be registered to get all of the resources. Okay. Let's see. Feel free to ask any questions for April and Laurent while they're with us.
Yeah, maybe we can just go back and underline a few of the questions. We already answered that in the chat, but just to be complete. So somebody was asking about the difference it makes if I use Azure Repo, so in Azure DevOps, right, or GitHub. I'm assuming it refers to the static web app demo, because from the time it was around that time, essentially no difference. You can deploy an Azure static web app from an Azure DevOps repository as well. It's just a different option in the portal. Somebody was asking a good question, which is, can this be done from Visual Studio as well? And the answer is really, I use Visual Studio a lot for code. Like, this is my coding environment. This is where I do all my testing. This is where I do, the heavy lifting, profiling things. And like, this is really a very powerful environment. You can also connect to your repository directly in Visual Studio, and then you can go and commit, push, pull from GitHub and everything from Visual Studio directly. I use Visual Studio Code more for everything which is related to CI/CD, to writing the GitHub Actions or creating them, doing some advanced stuff on the repo, like, for example, handling my pull requests, these kind of things. Obviously, you can also do .NET and C# and, writing web apps and JavaScript and everything, TypeScript in Visual Studio Code as well. So it's really up to you to decide what you want to use. Since really the center of the action is GitHub there, if you use a third-party tool, that's going to work the same as well. So really choose your preferred tool if you want. Personally, I like to really use Visual Studio. I've been using Visual Studio for 20+ years now, and this is really the environment I like. Everything I showed can be done in code. Most of what I showed can be done in Visual Studio as well. But I like to have this kind of split environment where I do my CI/CD, my Markdown, and everything else in Visual Studio Code, and then I do the heavy lifting and the code and the profiler in Visual Studio. I don't know, April, if you wanted to check also one of the other questions that you answered. I saw you answered a lot of them in the chat as well, right?
Yes, I think people are asking about the next session. I'll have Addie and team put that in the public chat for everyone. There are some people asking questions about GitHub Copilot and some of the other tooling. I don't know what we have publicly available. Like, we have quite a bit of content. We have the GitHub Copilot Trust Center, and I apologize, I didn't mention that or put a link up for that. But if you Google or Bing the GitHub Copilot Trust Center, we have a lot of information about the models we use, the security protocols. We don't tend to publicly publish the models we use because they change, and different elements of GitHub Copilot use different models, and they are changing quite a bit. There were questions around comparing some of that stuff. I don't think there's any more coming in. People asked for Laurent's and mine LinkedIn profiles. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat.
I'm actually busy doing that right now, so
Laurent's
it's going to come in 1 second. So this is mine and this is yours. Here we go.
And since I had some outages today, GitHub Copilot Workspace is still in preview. So is Models. You can sign up for Models I believe the links are going out after this in an email as well to get on board with it, test it, get access to it. And then with GitHub Copilot, it is available for everyone. We have different licensing tiers for GitHub Copilot. I didn't go over that today because I don't touch money at all, ever. But everyone can get access to GitHub Copilot, and you can sign up for it. And I don't think there's any more. There's a question about using the same process in PyCharm. I assume, Laurent, is that for what you've done, or is that what I've done?
I really don't know. It was posted at 1:07, so really just a moment ago. So I think what we can say is that, generally speaking, PyCharm, I'm not even familiar with PyCharm, to be honest, so I'm going to assume this is something to do with Python. Python is very much supported by Visual Studio Code. You have an extension for Python, which is going to do the syntax check and everything, and everything we showed, which is related to GitHub, works for Python as well. So if you want to have some, some deployment actions, for example, publishing your code to Azure, I'm sure this is possible. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know how to do that.
It is available in PyCharm, for the record. Sorry. I don't know if everything can be done. So I'm going to be very transparent in saying I don't do a lot with PyCharm. GitHub Copilot is available. A lot of what Laurent did and a lot of the plugins that we have with the pull requests, the actions views, etc., are available. To what extent, I don't know. We do have documentation on the GitHub site on it, but yes, it is supported in PyCharm.
Very good. So it's good to know.
And that list always changes. So I just want to make it really clear, like, AI is a very fast-moving world, right? So between Laurent and I, we don't know all the answers. We know very few of them. But yeah, there's so many changes. We're constantly adding features and updates. The GitHub documentation is really good. Again, Laurent and I post lots of feature updates on our LinkedIn and Twitter quite a bit. So stay tuned, keep your eyeballs open. And it is absolutely hard to keep up with all of it.
Yeah, I want to underline the GitHub models that you showed. It's really, for me, it's really the best way to learn. And I've been using Azure AI Studio, which is another one of those workspaces where you can, select from a model of AI models, from a catalog of AI models. You can test, you can change the system message, you can change parameters, etc. And this is really, for me, a developer coming to AI, a bit late in my career, I would say. I need to keep up with everything. And the fact that I can really go and play with those models at a very, very reasonable cost, trying things out, has been really life-changing and really helps me understand the concept. We have tons of events coming up also. Near you, you will see some event called the AI Tour, Microsoft AI Tour, which is going to show a lot of that. We have Ignite in November, so please register for that. This is going to be in Chicago. We are expecting lots and lots of developers there. And then April, you have Universe very soon, right?
Yeah, so we have quite a few events. I will be in São Paulo for the AI Tour in a few weeks. We have GitHub Universe the end of October. And if any of you are watching this are going to be at GitHub Universe, please come up and say hello. We also have .NET Conf in November, which fingers crossed I might be making an appearance at. So quite a few events. So please always do come up, reach out to us, ask us questions in person, throw questions to us after the event in LinkedIn. We're always happy to help or help get you the right answer. And I think that's the end of the questions in the chat as well, Laurent.
I believe so. I believe we answered everything else pretty much, yes.
Amazing. So if we speak up on keeping up, so this is why we created this series for you. We have, I wanted to show you the upcoming events that we have. So the next one going to be on September 26th, and we're going to speak about scaling and maintaining AI apps. Moving forward, we have a lot of great sessions about LLMs, SLMs, AI agents, use cases of how to build some copilots. And this is just few of the sessions that we have. We have a lot of great sessions coming up, also coming from GitHub, where we're going to speak about advanced security, GitHub Advanced Security. And obviously on the Reactor, we have every day a lot of great content for you. So please go ahead and check it out. We will also post the survey in the chat in the next 2 minutes. So go ahead, fill it up. I really want to thank for today's session to Laurent and April for an amazing session. For the preparation and for the great content that you brought up today. So thank you so much for the speakers and the V team, and also I want to thank each one of you that joined us today. You took the time to keep up with the technology, to learn, to invest in yourself, and we are here to support you in your process and your journey. So thank you everyone, and we really look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.